All right, so welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to try to put together the pieces of this guy, William Darrell Lindsey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we're using these excerpts from his Wikipedia page that you gave us.
I'm right.
And I know you want the whole picture, right?
Right.
But we don't want to get like too lost in all the little details.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And honestly, this is a story that could get really messy really easily.
Oh, I bet.
So we're just going to stick with the most important impactful details.
Okay, sounds good.
So, like, did you know this guy, Lindsay, when he was just 5 months old, survived this crazy car crash?
Wow.
Yeah, and his parents, both of them, they didn't make it.
Oh my gosh.
Talk about a dramatic way to start your life, right?
No kidding. It really makes you think about, the psychological effects of something like that
Yeah.
so early on. And then on top of that, he was adopted, right?
Right, right, by a couple who had just lost their own baby, their son.
Oh, wow.
So you've got all this grief, like, piled on top of more grief.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to imagine what that must have been like, that whole environment.
It's tough.
And it's easy to just get caught up in, like, the drama of it all.
Right, yeah.
But we're not here for just like the sensational stuff. We want to try to understand what happened.
Exactly.
So the source mentions his adoptive mom. She was pretty abusive,
Oh.
physically and emotionally.
Wow.
Like apparently she was really, really religious.
Okay.
Like she thought any little bad thing he did was like demonic or something.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
Yeah. So you've got that environment, like so strict and unforgiving.
Right.
And then you add on top of that the early loss, like losing his parents.
Yeah.
And then the bullying. He was bullied at school.
Oh, jeez.
It paints a really, really bleak picture of his, childhood.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like all these risk factors,
Right.
all coming together in one place.
It really makes you wonder if all that, like, planted the seeds for what he did later on.
It's possible, yeah.
Because, I mean, the source mentions that he was torturing cats.
Hmm.
Even setting fires when he was a kid.
Uh-oh.
That's not exactly normal kid stuff, right?
No, no. Those kinds of behaviors, especially the cruelty to animals, they're often like red flags,
Okay.
when you're looking at how violent individuals develop.
So, like, early signs of some serious problems.
Potentially, yeah. There's actually there's a term for this, the McDonald triad.
Oh, wow.
It links things like animal cruelty, bedwetting, and pyromania.
Really?
Yeah, so like these seemingly unrelated behaviors, they can actually potentially point to a predisposition towards violence.
Wow, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating and a little disturbing.
It is. And what's interesting is, even with all this going on in his childhood, there's like this big gap in what we know about him.
Oh,
Between his childhood and his first murder in 1983.
really?
Yeah. It's like, what was he doing all those years?
Right.
It mentions marriages and children, but it's almost like they're just side notes.
It's like we go straight from troubled kid to serial killer
Right.
with nothing in between.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, how did he present himself to the world? Was
Yeah.
he hiding this whole dark side?
Like a total secret life.
Yeah, or were there like little clues that people just missed?
Right.
It's like a piece of the puzzle is missing.
It is.
And it makes you question everything.
Okay, so we have this shadowy figure, right?
Right.
Coming out of this really messed up past.
Yeah.
And then, bam, the source just throws us right into his crimes.
Oh, wow.
It lists 7 victims, mostly prostitutes,
Oh, jeez.
murdered between 1983 and 1996. And it even says there might be more victims that we don't even know about.
That's cheering.
It's scary to think how many lives he might have actually affected.
Right. It really is. And when you look at the details of the crimes, like how brutal they were, it's hard to even grasp.
Yeah.
Take Lisa Foley, for example.
His first victim?
Yeah, his first known victim. The source says she was strangled back in 1983.
That's awful.
It points to this level of rage and control.
Yeah.
It's really hard to understand.
Strangulation's so personal,
It is.
It's not just about killing someone.
Right.
It's like you want to have power over them.
Exactly. You want to silence them.
It makes you wonder, was there something about these women, like specifically prostitutes, that made them targets for him?
Right.
Was it just because it was easy, opportunity?
Yeah.
Or was it something darker?
That's a key question, like why these women,
Yeah.
to really understand his psychology, it actually fits with a pattern you see a lot in serial killers, this power control type.
Oh, okay.
He probably chose victims that he saw as powerless.
Yeah.
So he could feel that dominance, fulfill this need for control that he maybe missed out on earlier in life.
So, like, he's taking all that trauma, from his own life,
Yeah,
and he's putting it on someone else,
it's possible.
trying to feel powerful by hurting others.
That's definitely a possibility. We see it a lot in cases like this. This need to control, to dominate.
Yeah.
It often comes from this deep feeling of inadequacy.
Really?
Yeah, or a lack of control in other parts of their life.
It's scary that someone's, like, inner demons could turn into something so destructive.
It is.
It's like they're putting on this act, this normal face for everyone,
Right.
but underneath, it's all this darkness.
Exactly. And what's really unsettling is that act can be really convincing.
Yeah.
The source mentions Lindsey was married twice,
Whoa.
and he had 7 kids.
7 kids.
7 kids.
Wow.
So how did he, balance that family life with this dark side?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Did he have this double life?
Right.
Keeping those two parts of himself totally separate?
Wait, compartmentalizing.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean, like, in this situation?
Think of it like your mind is a house
Okay.
with all these different rooms.
Right.
So someone like Lizzie, he might keep all those violent urges locked away.
In one room.
Yeah, in one room, sealed off from the rest of his life.
So he can, like, talk to his family.
Yeah.
Go to work, act normal.
Exactly.
While keeping that dark room hidden.
That's right.
That's both crazy and terrifying.
It is, yeah.
So he could have been living a normal life, but secretly having all these awful desires.
It's possible, yeah.
How does someone even do that?
It's a complicated psychological thing.
Yeah.
It really shows you how messed up these individuals can be.
Right.
We have to remember we're dealing with minds that just don't work by normal rules of morality.
Okay, so we're starting to put this puzzle together, right?
Yeah.
We have the traumatic childhood,
Uh-huh.
the mysterious adult years,
Right.
and then these brutal murders. Mostly women he probably thought were easy targets.
Right.
But there's still so much we don't know.
And that's what makes these deep dives so interesting.
Right.
We take these bits of information
Uh-huh.
and we try to make sense of a life that's been totally destroyed by violence.
It's like a detective story.
It is.
Where every little detail, every clue could be the key to figuring out who William Darrell Lindsey really was.
Exactly.
We were talking about compartmentalization, right? Like, Lindsey could have this normal life, but then, like, this hidden dark side. Is that normal for serial killers, or was he, like, a special case?
Oh no, it's pretty common actually. Think about Ted Bundy. Everyone thought he was charming, normal guy, but then all those horrible things he did.
Right, right.
It's this compartmentalizing that lets them blend in, function in society, often for years before they're caught.
It's one reason they're so hard to catch. So how do they even learn to do that? To compartmentalize? I mean, is that something they're born with, or is it something they learn to do?
It's most likely a bit of both. Nature and nurture.
Yeah.
Some people might be more prone to it, certain personality types, or maybe something in their brains.
Yeah.
But the environment definitely plays a part too. Like with Lindsey, that abusive upbringing, having to bottle up his emotions all the time, it could have made it easier for him to shut off those parts of himself.
That makes sense. If you grew up where, like, showing your feelings gets you punished, you learn to hide them.
Yeah, exactly. And over time, that hiding becomes a way to cope.
Oh, okay.
A way to deal with pain or trauma. But of course, those feelings don't just go away.
Right.
They can get twisted up inside, and come out in these really unhealthy ways.
So this compartmentalizing thing, it's like a survival tactic in a messed up way.
In a way, yeah. They can appear normal, function in the world, but at the same time, they're shielded from facing their own darkness. But it's a dangerous tactic. In the end, it just leads to more psychological damage.
And for Lindsey, that damage came out in those murders. You were talking about strangulation being a big part of his crimes. Is there like a psychology thing to that?
Oh, absolutely. Strangulation, it's not like other ways of killing,
Right.
It's very up close and personal. You have to be right there with the victim. Often there's a struggle. So it seems like for Lindsey, killing wasn't just about ending a life.
Right.
It was about having power, control over them.
It's like he gets some kind of twisted pleasure from the act itself.
It's disturbing, but yeah, it's a very real possibility. For some serial killers, the killing becomes a ritual.
Oh, wow.
It satisfies some deep psychological need, and the way they choose to kill often reflects that.
Okay, so we're seeing this pattern, right? The bad childhood, hiding all the emotions, this need for control, and then these brutal murders, often with strangulation. But we still have that missing piece, those years between the childhood and the killings.
Exactly. Those missing years, they really make you wonder.
Yeah.
Did something happen during that time, something that that pushed Lindsay over the edge? Or was he always like this, just waiting for his chance? It's a question that we might never know the answer to,
Right.
but it makes us want to keep digging, trying to figure out what his life was really like.
The source says that a taxi driver saw Lindsey commit his last murder,
Oh.
the one that got him caught. It's like this, like a moment of bad luck, like his perfect little world fell apart. Do you think he ever felt like he was untouchable, like he could get away with it forever?
That feeling of invincibility, it's pretty common in serial killers. Each time they don't get caught, they get more confident.
Yeah.
They might even get more reckless.
Oh, okay.
Their reality gets distorted. They start to believe they're smarter than everyone, that they can outsmart the system.
It's like a dangerous game.
Exactly. And usually that game ends in one of two ways. Either they mess up, they get careless, and then they're caught.
Right.
Or they take things too far. The violence escalates to a point where they can't control it anymore.
You mentioned escalation. Do we see that with Lindsey? Do crimes get like more often or more violent over time?
It's hard to say for sure. The information we have is pretty limited.
Yeah, yeah.
But there were hints that he did get more brutal. Like his first victim, she was strangled, right?
Right.
But later on, there were beatings, shootings, even torture.
Oh, wow.
It could mean the level of violence was increasing.
That's a scary thought. Like, the more he got away with, the worse it got.
Yeah, it's like he stopped caring about the consequences.
Right.
That's a big part of what makes a serial killer,
Mm.
They lose their sense of humanity. The killing becomes almost normal.
It's hard to imagine being that detached,
It is.
to just shut off all your empathy.
It's a disturbing truth, but it's something we have to face if we want to understand how their minds work.
Right. They don't follow the same rules as the rest of us.
Exactly. They're driven by dark things that most of us can't even imagine.
I keep thinking about that question, nature versus nurture. Was Lindsey, like, born evil, or did the things that happened to him make him that way?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It's something that's puzzled people for centuries. With Lindsay, we see a lot of things coming together. The trauma, the abuse, maybe some genetic predisposition, it all probably played a part.
It's like this recipe for disaster.
That's a good way to put it. It really highlights how our genes and our experiences can interact, how easily things can go wrong.
And with Lindsey, things definitely went wrong.
Sadly, yes. And while we may never fully understand why he did what he did, we can use his case to learn,
Right.
to look at the bigger picture, the things in society that lead to violence, and hopefully find ways to prevent these kinds of tragedies from happening again.
It's kind of unsettling, thinking about someone's life being like a recipe for disaster. It makes you wonder, could anyone have stepped in, like changed things before he went down that dark path?
It's a question that comes up a lot in cases like this. Was there a moment, a chance to intervene? It's hard to know for sure. But I think what we can learn from Lindsay's story is how important it is to see those early warning signs, those red flags.
Yeah. You mentioned the McDonald triad before. Are there other things like red flags that people should be looking out for?
Well, there are a few things, but we got to remember, no single thing means someone's going to become violent.
Right.
We're talking about like patterns, not guarantees.
Right, right.
Some common one are a history of aggression, violence, substance abuse, being isolated from others, and having trouble controlling emotions, especially anger.
So it's not just one thing. It's like a bunch of worrisome signs together.
Exactly. And it's about paying attention to the whole picture. Like a kid acting out, maybe they're having a rough time at home or at school.
Right.
But if it escalates, if they start being cruel to animals or doing other things that are really concerning, then it might be something more serious.
So early intervention, that's really important.
It is, yeah.
But what does that what does that look like? What can actually help?
Well, it can be a lot of things, therapy, counseling, maybe social programs that help with poverty, abuse, lack of education, things like that. It's about creating a safety net, giving people the resources they need so they don't fall through the cracks.
It makes me think about Lindsay's his family, his wives, his children. The source doesn't say much about them, but wow, I can't imagine what they went through. Finding out that your husband, your father, is a serial killer, that's got to be just devastating.
Absolutely. It turns them into victims, too, in a way. Not only do they have to deal with the horror of what he did, but their whole world is shattered.
Right.
The person they thought they knew, the person they loved, is suddenly someone completely different,
Right.
capable of such awful things.
You mentioned that there's an episode of Evil Lives Here about Lindsay's daughter.
Yeah.
It makes you realize, the impact of these crimes goes way beyond the actual victims. It spreads out like ripples.
It does. That ripple effect is huge. It affects families, communities, even society as a whole. It forces us to confront this darkness that's out there and to question what we think we know about people.
It's a lot to think about. And I think it's important to say there's no easy answers here. This is complicated stuff. Psychology, sociology, even philosophy.
You're right. It's all connected, and that's part of what makes these deep dives so interesting. They challenge us to think, to question our beliefs, to talk about these difficult things.
So we've looked at Lindsay's past, the awful things he did, the psychology behind it all, and how it affected everyone involved. What's the takeaway here for our listener? What do we want them to remember?
I think the biggest thing is awareness.
Awareness.
Yeah. Being aware of the warning signs, understanding how all these different factors can come together to create violence, and realizing that everyone touched by these tragedies deserves our empathy.
And maybe some hope too, right?
Yeah,
Hope that if we understand these dark parts of human behavior, we can stop them from happening again.
exactly. Knowledge is power. The more we learn about these things, the more we talk about them, the better chance we have of creating a safer, more just world.
Well said. This has been a heavy topic, but an important one, exploring the life and crimes of William Darrell Lindsey. Thanks for being here with us on this deep dive. We encourage you to keep learning about this stuff, the complexities of human behavior, and to keep having these conversations about how we can make the world a better place.
Thanks for having me.